Hi there, and welcome to Live Loved. I'm Amy Hirsch. I'm here with Julie Wright, and we are picking up on a conversation about stewarding our sexuality. Last week, we talked about how women may place their identity in their kind of physical beauty and how that can kind of end up soliciting the wrong attention from men that aren't theirs. Today, we want to veer into when that crosses the line from trying to get affirmation and attention from men to, okay, now you're in a really inappropriate place of adultery, even. So Julie, let's pick up on our last conversation. We were talking about boundaries and what it looks like when, we as women might take things a little bit too far, and trying to gain power and attention and affection from men. Let's talk about when that really goes into dangerous territory.
Yeah. So adultery can be physical or it can be emotional, and I would say that it never just happens. It usually starts with a thought or something in the mind, and then that can move to this connection spark that then can move into something in the heart, which eventually can manifest in the relationship and in an inappropriate emotional or physical relationship that violates the boundaries of marriage.
Mm-hmm.
And how does it happen? And
Right.
a lot of times people are like, I didn't see it coming, or it just happened, or we were just so connected. And this kind of piggybacks with the discussion on boundaries that maybe at the end of our discussion we can talk about, because boundaries aren't to make rules like, oh my gosh, talking to somebody of the opposite sex is wrong. It's not
Right.
that it's wrong, but sometimes it's not wise. And sometimes we have to be honest enough and discerning enough of what is going on in our own heart in this friendship, co-working space, whatever, to really guard our attention, our affection, our attraction, our connection, and our preferences. Because it's super easy to start to slip into something that it's like, oh, this relationship is easy. Oh, this is affirming. Oh, this feels good. And if you just kind of follow the bunny, oh, it feels good, so I'm just going to follow this, we can end up in a snare.
Mm-hmm.
And that is what we want to talk about today. How does that happen? And a lot of times, I think in marriage, we run into things like, I mean, anyone who's been married for a while knows, you start out with this idea like marriage, well, maybe not everybody did, but I did. Marriage is going to be a date that never ends. Like if a date with my husband is fun, it's just going to be one date and that lasts forever. Yay. I know you mock me now, but yeah. But it's real life sets in. People get tired, people get sick, you have responsibilities. You don't just see the best of each other, you see the worst of each other. You get added pressures. Then you have kids and your time is stretched, your resources are stretched.
Yeah, you've
You're
got bills to pay. You're
Yeah,
both exhausted from different jobs.
all this stuff. Real life comes crashing into this little romantic bubble. And I do think, back to our society, that we have both elevated identity for women based on sex appeal and sensuality, but we have also created this. Most movies end and they fell in love and and then they lived happily ever after. We just have this like fairy tale thing that the moment of, you're mine, I'm yours. That's like, and then that just lasts forever.
Mhm.
We don't do a good job of setting up what real love based on commitment,
Mhm.
based on going the different distance, based on overcoming failure, based on a lot of forgiveness and a truckload of grace is required for committed love to last.
Mhm.
And so I think what often can happen early in a marriage relationship is you can be in this space, and all of a sudden, things get really normal. Things get really familiar. There's that phrase, familiarity breeds contempt, like, wow, it's the same person every day. I walked into the room and he used to just light up, and now I walk into the room and he doesn't even look up, just kind of like, I'm
Right.
here. Do
Right.
you see me, or whatever. Just, and men and women both can have those feelings. And that's just the reality of the ebbs and flows of relationships. And yes, a great safeguard is to cultivate romance and cultivate connection in your own marriage, right?
Mhm.
However, what can happen is in these times of stress, the times when you're both kind of maxed out and tapped out, or just busy, or too separate, you can have very legitimate needs or desires like, I'm lonely. People, your husband travels or you travel, or, it's just a season where the busyness or illness a lot of things can come in and create very real feelings. I'm lonely. I feel neglected. I'm feeling ignored. But I think that loneliness, or that feeling of, am I still whatever I thought I was? And that goes back to identity. A lot of midlife crisis stems from, am I still attractive? Do I still have it? Am I, and all of a sudden you bring your question of, do I still have it? There's some books written, they say the woman's question is, am I beautiful? Do you love me? And the man's question, oh, now I'm forgetting what it was. Something about being adequate, and kind of being the hero or something. Don't quote me
Right.
on that. But the women, am I beautiful? Do you love me? And all of a sudden, if our spouse, we feel like we're not getting it, or maybe they do answer it, but it's them. But what do other people think? And if you bring that question to the table or out into the open space and start letting anyone else answer it,
Mhm.
there can be someone newer. They might not be better, but they're new, more interesting, or more attentive to you. And all of a sudden, you're
Mhm.
getting attention, you're getting affirmation, you're getting um, something that you feel like you're lacking over here. And that feeds on that ego. It can even feed real needs. So when those real needs come, we have to know where to go for that, and not go to a place of taking it from a source that is not ours to take from.
Mhm. Which sometimes is a little murky,
Yeah,
that the lines being crossed over, especially nowadays when we live in a
yeah,
society where kind of like anything goes,
yeah, yep,
Um, but we touched on this in our last episode, was just that we are bombarded with images
yeah,
and ideals that aren't reality.
yeah,
For men, they're being bombarded with very enticing, overtly sexual
yeah,
images. And I think as
yeah,
women, we're being bombarded with scenarios that are very fairy tale like,
yeah,
that make us have a wanting to, oh, my marriage isn't like that, or I'm not on that
yeah,
vacation, or my husband doesn't plan that for me. And
yeah,
so it can be it can really inadvertently attack our mindsets on what realistic expectations are.
yeah,
And then the right scenario, met up with the right scenario of, you find yourself in a workplace where maybe a male counterpart is affirming your talent,
yeah,
or maybe it's someone who has
hmm,
power to promote you,
yeah.
and all of a sudden, boom, you're back to using your sexuality for self gain in a way that's so dangerous. And this plays out all the time.
It plays out often. And one of the words that you said in that scenario was the discontent.
Yes.
I think the enemy first plants a seed of discontent. And
Okay.
it can be a legitimate discontent. If you're lonely, if you have lost connection, there can be some legitimate discontent. But what you do about it to address it, like the worst thing you can do. I remember a season of my marriage early on, and we were just missing each other, and I was super frustrated. And I'm like, Lord, I do not know what to do.
Mm,
And the thing that came to me was, whatever you do, don't sin.
mm,
Like, there's things you can do, but the worst thing I could do would be to turn to the right or the left and dive into one of those sin
mm,
pools. Dive into, oh, this guy is giving me attention here. This guy asked me out here. And, the opportunities are there. It's not that there's not opportunity at times, but don't sin and take that discontent. And that's when I started diving into letting the Lord minister to those places of need. So I
mm,
got off that cycle of discontent leading to temptation, leading to, oh, I better fix this, to more discontent. That was a cycle. And I realized it was because I was looking to my husband to be the end all, the
mhm,
be all and the end all. And when the Lord was like, you know what, your husband is a good husband, he's a great husband, but he's going to be a lousy savior. So look to me to be your filling, to be what fills my heart first is the love of God, so that what I receive from my husband is like the icing on the cake.
mm,
It's not the whole meal. I'm not what I mean, I had to get out of the space of walking through life starving. Like starving for attention, starving for love, starving for affection, because I brought that legitimate hunger.
mhm,
If I bring all that hunger to our marriage and say, you need to meet all my needs, that is an impossible ask for any man or woman for
mm,
that matter. I needed to bring that hunger and say, Lord, love me to wholeness and fullness, which is the whole message of Redeeming Eve, right? The book. Love me, let me be whole, complete, content,
mhm,
and then I can receive and become both a giver and a receiver of this love, not based on need or hunger. So I think a lot of adultery comes out of unfulfilled hunger, that people have not resolved where to get that. And some
mhm.
of it just comes out of that broken identity idol. And worst case scenario, some people thrive on the thrill of the chase and the game and all that. And that's
Right.
a really sinful thing, but it can go from real hunger to a really sinful motive of self, but it never fulfills and it always destroys.
Do you think that do you think that there are some women who don't know they're starving for the wrong kind of attention? I'm just sitting here thinking about subtle ways that we all might
Mm-hmm.
flirt with
Disaster.
disaster.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and I think it happens very often.
Yeah. And even when you're not looking for it, it can happen because all of a sudden you can be in a scenario where you didn't even realize you were thirsty till somebody kind of watered that or gave you a drink. And you're like,
Mhm,
oh, wow,
mhm,
I haven't been affirmed in that area or noticed in that area for a while or something. You're like, wow, that was really nice. That felt good. And so God can do things through other people in the sense of he can affirm us in those things. But if we live out of that place of need and hunger, that often it's the root that leads us into compromise,
mhm,
because all of a sudden we see another source, a well that's got more water or is more freely giving that water right now, and you can start to take that. But here's I've I've watched close up and personal. I've watched this dynamic both in church, workplaces, in extended family scenarios. I have seen this dynamic of adultery take place and watched the fallout and the destruction. And if you have lived for a while, many of us probably have friends or have been in the scenario ourselves and know that what the enemy promises with adultery, when he holds out, the shiny box and says, this is good, it sparkles, it's going to make you happy, it's going to fill the hole in your heart. If you take that, it is a poison that once it is ingested, it's like a bomb goes off in your life.
Mhm.
It's a ticking time bomb. The people that I have watched go down this road, and by God's grace, I mean, I've seen the roads, I've taken a step or two and been like, backpedal out of that. No, I mean,
Right.
even
Whoa.
unwittingly or unknowingly, like, whoa, whoa, whoa,
Mhm.
but I have seen it up close and personal enough to realize that bomb destroys.
Mhm.
So, I mean, adultery, first of all, is because of the need base, it's selfish.
Mhm.
If I am in this relationship with this person, we talked about this last episode, the prostitute reduces you to a loaf of bread. I am using that person for my needs.
Mhm.
Adultery at the heart of it is 100% selfish.
Mhm.
People can say, I love that person. They're the one actually, you love yourself and you love how that person makes you feel.
Mhm.
It is self-centered love
Yeah.
because it is based on coveting and consuming. Coveting and consuming. The Bible says don't covet your neighbor's wife. It's based on I want what somebody else has for myself. It is coveting and consuming. So it takes for itself the object. We want to possess that person for ourselves. It steals from somebody else for yourself. And at the end of the day, what I have seen, one of the most curious dynamics is adultery, the act of adultery, destroys the thing that attracted you in the first place.
Hmm.
So, for example, I'll just use a pastor ministry, just out there. So let's say this person is connected to this male pastor and thinks, oh, man, he's such a godly man. He is so spiritual and he's so loving and he's so wise. And like, I wish my husband was a better spiritual leader, and just look at who he is as this. And you might even admire this incredible character of this man. But the act of adultery, when that adulterous relationship happens, it's not like you move up into that space with that wonderful man. The act of adultery blows up and he moves down into a man who's lost his integrity, who
Yeah.
has no wisdom, who forsook his God, who forsook his family. He is no longer that. And we see that in the story of Bathsheba.
Mhm.
She has this affair with David, who has probably been her childhood hero. They sang songs about David in Israel. He slew Goliath. He was the focus of her family's devotion. So he's a wonderful worshiping warrior.
Yeah.
She has this affair with him, and within months, he has turned into a lying murderer. He kills her husband, has him killed, and now he's lying to people, doing this huge cover up. She's probably like, where's the worshiping warrior? Where's the man that I have admired for the last decade of my life?
Mhm.
And in the taking of him illegitimately, she destroys what she actually was attracted to or loved.
Yeah.
And I see this play out in the lives and relationships around me when I've seen this dynamic. You destroy what you wanted. It's a
Yeah.
trick. It is a trick from Satan.
Yeah. You say in your book, you say sexual sin comes in many shapes and forms, but it
Hmm.
always comes with a price to pay.
Yeah,
And Bathsheba and David paid the price. They conceived a child during their affair, and that child died.
yeah,
Um, Not to mention that her husband was killed, and there was deception, and I mean, it was a poison.
yeah.
Uh, and
It
I
blew up
mean,
her world. Yeah,
but I think when people kind of cross that line, they're just they're full of deception. They're deceived, and they want what they want.
yeah. And
Um,
there's seduction in that. So
yes.
you have to understand, and very real and very powerful feelings. and
Mm.
emotions. So I've often told my girls, your feelings are real. You really feel that way. It doesn't always mean they're true or that they can lead you to where you should go. Like people can actually really feel, I really feel he loves me more than my spouse, or she loves me more than my spouse. Well,
Or
you
I'm
have,
really going to be happier with
yeah,
that person other than my
yeah.
spouse.
Yeah, and the grass always looks greener on the other side, but if you'd water your own grass, your grass might be greener, Like take care of your own. Like if you invested, what's always amazing to me in these scenarios, and I've had to confront it in my own heart when I start bouncing around in my own heart or mind with those kind of thoughts is like, man, if I was investing this affirmation and this affection and this connection and care to connect with my own husband, this relationship would be way more satisfying. And we have history and we have longevity and we've gone through the battles together. And it is such a quick trade. Esau in the Bible traded his birthright because he was so hungry. He just traded it for a bowl of stew.
Mm.
And then he regretted it. He's like, how did I let my hunger get the best of me that I traded my entire inheritance for a meal?
Ooh.
Because sin is pleasurable for a season. The Bible says there is a moment. Bathsheba and David, that night might have felt magical.
Mhm.
It might have been like love is in the air, and it's spring, and they have this moment of deep passion. It might have just been like, oh,
Mhm.
but it was fleeting. And then the truckload, the tsunami of destruction comes after them.
Mhm.
She goes back to her house. She's alone. She has to look up there. David's light is on. Is he with a concubine? Is he with another wife? Who's he with? She's alone. Meanwhile, she's alone in her home for months with a baby growing in her. And as soon as that baby shows, Levitical law says they can come and stone her in the streets.
Mhm.
Did David communicate to her? Did he tell her he was going to save her? Did he have a plan? Was he just going to let her die? And she was a childless wife at the time. Her husband's gone, no children. It just, the loneliness and the fear of the consequence must have weighed super hard on her.
Sure.
And then David goes through the whole scheme, arranges for her husband to be murdered on the battlefield. She hears about it, has to go through a grieving time. It's like, did she imagine, like, when they pulled the hood back from the archer that shot her husband, does she see her own face? I could imagine dreams like that. Like, you know what? Yeah, we say he just died on the battlefield. I know I'm 1,000% responsible for this.
Right.
Did she love him? Did she miss him? Now she has fear, she has guilt, she has shame. This is different than, oh, passionate love and security,
Mhm.
because she thought she was trading for this love and security, and her life is becoming full of guilt, shame, death. Her husband dies. David takes her to the palace. Maybe they thought, phew, the cover up worked. She has a baby. Nathan confronts them. The baby gets sick and she holds her baby till he dies.
Mhm.
Death came. And when we move into these places of compromise, it can be the death of a marriage. But there's the death of your purity, there's the death of your security, there's the death of your reputation, there's the death of your influence. If
Mm.
you're in ministry, it can be the death of your leadership or your ministry.
Yeah.
I mean, sexual sin has taken down more great and mighty men and women
Yeah.
than almost anything. And it's why it matters. It's why we have to understand that it is a lie and a trick of the enemy.
Mm.
It promises something that it might deliver it, for a second, and then what else comes? It's like a Trojan horse.
Yeah.
You're getting this thing, but as soon as it opens up what's behind the curtain, your family is shattered. Your
Yeah.
kids are shattered.
Mhm.
Your legacy can be, I mean, this can be shattered for generations.
Yes.
It has fallout that is substantial
Yeah.
and
So
worth it.
how do we guard against this, Julie? what are the
Mhm.
practical steps we can take
Yeah.
to
And
our
again,
sexuality?
guard your heart, for it is the wellspring of life. I
Mhm.
think that verse about guarding your heart is so important. And that is where it requires some, at least personal, emotional honesty and transparency. I need to guard my heart. I need to know and be honest with God. Where am I vulnerable? Where am I hurting? Actually, where am I not hurting? Like, oh, that was super nice. That was fun. Oh, I love this attention, whatever.
Right.
I mean, I need to be honest with the Lord and with myself about that. And, just practically, there's a great book, and some people may not like it because they don't like rules, but boundaries protect us. They protect what we let
Sure.
in and where
Yeah.
we stay. And it's
Yeah.
called, well, back when I read it, it was called Hedges, but I think they rewrote it calling, and now it's titled Loving Your Marriage Enough to Protect It. And
Mm.
it gave some examples of boundaries that help protect your marriage. A very famous minister, Billy Graham, he never went anywhere alone. He wouldn't get in an elevator alone when he traveled.
Mm.
He had men go into his hotel room first and make sure nobody had snuck in there. And guess what? There were times where women had,
Really?
because it became like, I'm going to get Billy Graham, like a
To bring
predatory
down his
spirit.
ministry. Yeah.
Yeah, you know what, when he comes into his room and sees me, whoa, and
Right.
he never went anywhere alone. And
Mhm.
people could say that's hypersensitive, or you're not living in grace or freedom. And actually, he said, these boundaries give me freedom, because I don't want the freedom to sin. I want freedom from sin. I
Wow.
want the freedom to come home to my wife and look at it, and she can have that freedom to be secure in my love. And so this book really laid out, you know, if you drink alcohol, do you drink alcohol when your spouse isn't there? Early on, my husband and I, we weren't big drinkers anyway, but if he went to an after hours, if they had a work thing, it was like, I don't drink when my wife's not here.
Right.
I don't need to even have the loosening up of your, you know, I don't need to make an inappropriate joke. I don't need to do that. We put boundaries on if we were alone with the opposite sex. And, it then technology kind of came up, and all of a sudden you're like, what? We need to put some boundaries on our technology and how we do that. I personally have some boundaries. People Facebook request me to be friends. I will not, and I would say my husband does the same in that personal social media space. I won't accept a friend request from a man that I don't know.
Mm. That's good.
But it
Good.
happened. I mean, you'd be surprised. And I don't, maybe it is a man, maybe it's not. Maybe it's somebody with a fake account just trying to entrap me and be like, oh, I could find out if Julie Wright was willing to text me, or was willing to, like,
Right.
people are fishing all the time for that connection on social media. So
That's
I
good.
believe that if we will guard our heart,
Mhm.
our connections first, the boundaries in our personal relationships, and how we engage the opposite sex, we have mitigated a lot of the opportunity out here for anything more serious to happen. And so you have to know yourself and know where do my lines need to be, because I need to be honest with my own vulnerabilities. And vulnerabilities can change in seasons. You might feel totally comfortable in these relationships, and then all of a sudden you're in a hard season of your marriage, or you just went through having grief or loss, and you're like, you know what? I need to pull those lines way in, because I really can't accept comfort or prayer from this person. I'm too vulnerable. And I would also say prayer. Do not pray alone with somebody of the opposite sex. As a woman on staff of a ministry, I was called into situations all the time where a pastor was like, this person needs prayer. I'm calling Julie, because I was the woman on staff. Like, Julie's going to either pray with me for you, or I'm just going to have Julie pray for you, and I'm going to step
Sure.
out.
Yeah.
And those are wise boundaries, because you're less likely to ever get into the scenario if you guard your heart, guard your emotional connection, guard your affections. And I
Mhm.
think that is and press into the Lord to love you and then water your own marriage. Press into loving the person you're married to.
So good, Julie. So much to chew on and think about and pray about. I appreciate this
Yeah.
discussion and the wisdom that you shared. We will be back here next week. We'll pick up our talk again on stewarding your sexuality here on Lived Loved.